Hello and good evening. It's Trisha here. I'm sorry I can't be actually live, but I didn't want you to miss out on the 11th block of the block of the month quilt. So I thought I'd record a video as I'm not really feeling 100% at the moment, but at least sitting down I can focus on showing you how to make this block. It's called the spinning wheel. It's a basic block, but I've just added borders to it to bring it up to our 9.5-inch unfinished size. And nothing particularly difficult about this one, because I thought we could do with a couple of easy ones to finish off with. So this is what we're going to make. I've just done it in 3 colours, so my spinning pinwheel, I call it spinning pinwheel. My pinwheels have the same, the centre for the flying geese, as my borders, but if you wanted to do 4 different colours, you are more than welcome to. So, how do we begin? The PDF is up in the group for you to download, and what you'll need is 4 pieces, which are the strips which make our small part here. Those are these ones. We then need our flying geese part, which is the darker blue here, and then our background colour, which I've used in the lighter colour. So here are my background. So these are the pieces that need to be cut in the squares, in the sizes, in the 2-inch squares. The outer strips, or not the outer strips, the strips that make this small part of the block, you need 4 of these, are 3.5 inches by 2 inches, as are the flying geese, the darker one. They're also 3.5 by 2. Then for the borders here, we've got 2 pieces that are 6.5 by 2 and 2 pieces on the opposite sides which are 9.5 by 2. So let's begin. And I think the first thing we're going to do, I'm sorry if the machine's the wrong way round, but because I am recording it, it doesn't do it. It might show you differently, I don't know. But what I can see, it's the opposite way round. But hey ho, it doesn't matter. So let's first of all take our pieces to make our flying geese. 1, 2, 3, 4. So just pop those pieces, the 3.5 by 2, right side facing up. And what we're going to do is take one of our 2-inch squares, and we are going to place that right sides together with one of the corners. So line those 3 edges up with that corner. And now you can either draw a diagonal line. So let me just get a ruler here, so we can draw a diagonal line, so we're right sides together, and we are going to, I'm going to do it from this edge to here and work on, so it doesn't really matter which side, as long as you go from the centre of a long side across to a corner. Oh no, that pen's working, okay. So there we are. So draw a diagonal line, or you can use your seam guide tape like this here if you wanted to, or if you're used to patchwork, you can just eyeball it. So you need to put 1 into each corner of each of these 4 pieces. So starting off, putting them in the exact same corner, so either one side or the other, doesn't matter, but we're going to do just 1 at a time. So we'll put that one just there. And then mark the direction of your diagonal, if you're marking it, in exactly the same direction for each of those pieces. So what I'm going to do is, for this one, we will lower our stitch length to 1.8 as we're doing patchwork, or a small size, and then just follow that line. And then we can take our next block, so I'm going to chain piece, and what I'll do here, I'm using my seam tape, and I'm lining up the diagonal points, the corners, with this centre line here, so that I can stitch myself the diagonal. So I'm just watching that corner along that diagonal line. And if you can chain piece and have them all going in the same direction, like so, that means they will go easily under the needle, and you'll have your seams going in exactly the same direction each time. So just pop it under the needle, and you can see that everyone is exactly the same. So we're just going from one corner to the other, and then I'm just going to clip these apart because we do need to work one side at a time. So having done that one side, we're going to trim off that triangle at the side, so about 1/4 of an inch to the side of our stitch line there. And don't think, oh, I'm going to put the other square on as well, because we need to press before we do anything else. So let me just bring in the ironing board here, and we'll just take these to the mat, the ironing board, and if we put them all the same direction, it's easy to press them all. So I'm just taking that first one, I'm going to set the seam, pull that corner back, give it a little pull, not stretch, but just pull that out so that your whole seam is away from, so that it's like that. So you've got that fully extended. You don't want any pleats on that side, otherwise, oh, that looked a bit funny just there. Just make sure that is fully opened to revert back to the exact rectangle that we had before we added a square, trimmed it and pressed it back again. So just pull that out and press that. So I'm using the side of the iron because that's nice and easy. It just gives you the whole edge of the iron, is making sure that presses out completely. So there we are, nice diagonal line. And similarly with the last one, so just pop that on there, pull that out, and there is our there are our 4 done at the first stage. So I'm going to lay them all in exactly the same orientation. So all of the bits that are trimmed off are under each other. Then I'm going to take one, and I'm going to get one of my other squares, the background ones, and lay that right sides together into that corner. And this time I'm going to stitch across the diagonal here. So it's going in the opposite way, in the opposite direction to that diagonal. So we're going to come across the seam. So again, I'm just going to pop that under the needle, and we're going to stitch along that diagonal. If you want to draw your line in, absolutely can. If you want to place pins in there, but what I do is line up that corner and then line those edges and pop that under and straight across that diagonal so that it comes off at the other point, the other corner, and that's going to give us our perfect seam. And by doing this, it's giving us a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Where those 2 squares overlap at that top, that is going to give us, as I say, the 1/4 inch seam allowance, so that we get those nice points that we always aim to get. So that's all of those done. So again, let's just clip them apart, and then we're just going to trim off. So that's what it looks like. We're just going to trim off to the side like that. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. So it doesn't matter if it's not exactly a 1/4 inch. You don't want it cut right next to your stitching. You do want it to be as smallish. You don't want to leave larger than a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So let's just take those to the ironing board again. And again, let's have, if you have them this way round, we can set the seam and open that out and press again. So there you can see our flying geese, and we have our 1/4 inch seam allowance at the top there. So set the seam, side of the iron against the seam, and pop that aside. And then number 3, set the seam, whole side of the iron, press outwards, not backwards and forwards, but we're basically, it's an ironing motion but pressing. So we're just pulling that out and straight across. So we have our 4 flying geese ready to join to our next part. So back to the machine now. So we are going to have, if we have all of our geese pointing upwards, we need our, oh, not our background, this is our background, the cream. We're going to need our small strip here to go along here, where the seam allowance is. So we're going to pop that right sides together. I'll put one on each piece first of all, so that we're all ready to go, and just check that you've got your pieces right sides together again, because I stitched one that wasn't right sides together, so the seam ripper came out. So right, let's take one at a time. Now, although I've put this solid piece on the top, I find it better to turn it the other way around so that we can actually see where our intersection is, where this seam crosses this one, and then we can stitch either absolutely on or just to the right of, just a needle's width, so that we get a lovely point there. So just line those raw edges up, and this should fit. It should fit exactly to the strip that we cut. So if you start stitching, and then just make sure, pulling at this other end, make sure that fits beautifully down here, and then watch for that intersection there. And we can do these all at the same time as well. So again, I've got right sides together. There we go. I've got the solid piece of fabric underneath, lining that edge which is going under the needle first of all, and then making sure that that fits perfectly down this end, and the raw edges align, and then I'm watching that intersection piece there. And you'll see when I press these next that the intersection goes perfectly. So I've lined that up under the first bit that's going over under the needle, and then it's just pulled a little bit there. So let's just pull that round so that fits this end. Make sure those raw edges are aligned there, and make sure that's going down. Watch for that intersection, and like I did, I've just stitched a needle's width to the side. Now just make sure you're always stitching over this seam here. If you stitch that side, you've got something which will give you a different block. Wouldn't be wrong, but for this particular block, it isn't the right place to stitch it, but could always be used in another project. So again, 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way to the end. So we're just going to trim these apart like so, and then we're going to give those a quick press as well. So if I just bring the ironing board in there, and again taking one at a time, just set the seam, open it up, and press that back like so. So that's nicely pressed. So as you can see, we've got the point hitting that edge. In actual fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to press it the other way around. I'm going to have my seam going so that on the back I've got my seam fully open as that triangle there. So in actual fact, I'm going to turn it the other way up, set the seam and open that up and press that back. It fits much nicer. Can you see how that seam, that point is right on the seam? So it's your lighter strip on the top, which means then the seam is going to go, it is going under the lighter side, but it makes for less bulk with the whole block. So nice and easy so far. Set the seam, just pull that so it's nicely open. And I've got all 4 of my blocks with the nice point, which was just what we want. So next thing, so all of these need to be rotated. So let's just lay them out here. So if you look at the PDF, you'll see if we have them all, let's line them all up. There we are, all in the same orientation. So we've got all of the flying geese at the top. So the first one, if we put the first one down there, the next one is going to be rotated 90 degrees and sitting next to it. And then the one we're going to put up here is turned another 90 degrees. So they're actually turning around. So that's the same, 90 degrees, another 90 degrees, and goes there. And here we will go another 90 degrees so that you can see, wrong way there, you can see they are rotating. Now in my usual way, I'm going to join these like chain piecing again, because we could so easily turn one of these round accidentally. So top row here, we'll put right sides together, and bottom row right sides together. And I know I'm going to stitch down this seam and down this seam here. Now what you'll find is there is one seam, no seam matching, but we can line that up like so, and we can just stitch along that edge. So always start, and then that's just pulling a little bit at an angle. So I'm just lining that up so that those raw edges are completely aligned, straight down there, and then bring my other one over and line that top right first of all, so that, because that's we're lining it up from there, and then just pull that down so that fits into that corner. Make sure the raw edges align at the side, and cut. Now we're not going to cut these apart, we're going to keep them as they are, and we're going to open them out, and without pressing at the moment. So I'm just going to flip that top one back, finger press so that the seam is going that way. This one I move over first before I open it, and that way the seam allowance is going in the opposite direction. So just finger press that open, and you can see that I've got a lovely 1/4 inch seam allowance here and here, so that we get a nice meet in the middle. So because they're joined, I can see that they're all in the right position. So I'm now going to put them right sides together, and we will flip that so that we can nest the seam in the middle. So just pull that so that's nicely nested. I can also see where that intersection is there, and that should be 1/4 inch, just like there. So you should have a little pin. I practically always pin at this point so that we get a really good intersection. And then this should fit with the bottom piece as well. So just align that from that edge and straight under, and just make sure these edges here are fully aligned. And just before we get to the pin, look for that intersection, hold that piece there, and that comes over there, and then straight across. And hopefully we will have a nice intersection in the middle. Not bad at all. Okay, so now we just need to press that again, because all we've got left to do is to add our borders. So at this point I haven't pressed these seams yet, so just carefully press that one in that direction and the opposite side. These were the ones, the seams that we just pushed back, and then I can press that centre seam like so, just pulling that out, and then flip it over to the other side, and we can give that a proper press from that side, just making sure all those seams are correctly pressed. You can see how much better that looks. So we go from both directions, and that is now beautifully flat and ready for our borders. So the first two borders are going to be 6.5 inches long, because at the moment this block should measure 6.5 inches. So I've got two pieces, as I said, the same as my flying geese, but if you wanted to use a different fabric, you could, and have 4 different colours. And I'm going to do, well, it's basically the same all the way around. So I'm going to do top and bottom, and again I'm going to flip my block onto here, and now this should fit, and it does. So line up this first corner, which is going under your needle. Make sure that is lined up exactly there. Pin if you need to, and start stitching, and then line the rest of it up and just give that a little pull so that lines up perfectly at that end. And then also looking, so you can pin if you want to, just making sure these raw edges align at the sides, so there's no seam matching here. Straight down here, 1/4 of an inch all the way. And one more. Perfect. And then flip it round, and we're going to place on the opposite side the other piece. So again, align, a bit close here, align that edge. This very first corner we're going into. Gosh, I feel my voice going again. There we are. So start stitching, take the other end, line that up, and just pull it to the side so that these edges align here. And straight over there. Whoops. Make sure that seam doesn't push up all the way to the other edge. Then I'm going to press those seams back as well. So back to our trusty iron board, set the seam, open it out, and press that back, flip it round to the other side, set the seam, flip that border back, little press there. Okay, so we've got two sides, two borders on here, one each side, and then the final ones are the top and the bottom. So these pieces are 2 inches wide by 9.5 inches long. And again, if we pop that right side up and then put our block right side down onto it, align that edge, that corner, make sure that fits perfectly, straight under the needle, just a few stitches just to catch that down, and then you can make sure that at this end this aligns perfectly as well, like so. Now it doesn't line up well in at this side, so you just want to lift that. Let's start sewing down here. It's just the pressing that does this. So I'm lining those raw edges, and then in that centre there I'm just going to stitch down there, and then that's all lined up perfectly there. So we'll stitch right to the end. One more. Okay, so there's one border, as you can see there. And then this side, right side up for our border piece, and then flip this over, so no, put it on top and align that corner, and that's it. Good idea to use a pin there because it can slip a little bit. If it does, it just means the border won't fit. So start stitching, align that very end. I'm very much one for just holding it together, but if you need to pin, it is no problem at all. So let's just make sure that's lined up down there. Go over that seam there. I can see the rest of it there is nicely aligned. Over that centre seam there. Just make sure that's nice and flat. And then I can see that that is aligned with that edge there. So just stitch all the way down. I can tell talking really isn't too good for me. So let's go back to our ironing board here, and we're going to do exactly the same. Set the seam and then force that open. Just pull it open and press down so that it's fully opened, and then exactly the same with the other side here. Set the seam that we've just stitched and open that out. Just give it a little pull just to make sure that's fully opened. I'll tell you what I should have done. A little bit of best press goes a long way. So let's give it a little spritz there of our delicious. I did use it on my fabric originally. Forgot to say about that. But apart from the beautiful aroma of lavender fields, it gives it a really good finish. So, a bit of thread there. There is our finished block, just the same as my other one. Let's pop it down here. There is our spinning pinwheel. Spinning pinwheel, just the same as that one here. So I've got two to go side by side. Nice and easy. And wouldn't it look nice, just the one block in a whole quilt, just doing different fabrics. And you've got this movement from your pinwheel spinning around with some borders. So, thank you very much for joining me. I know it's been a short one. I'm trying to keep my voice not speaking too much because it's come back, as you can hear, but likely to falter if I go for too long. But hopefully I should feel much, much better tomorrow with a little bit more rest, and be back to you for Thursday evening with a couple of little demos and the last of the Christmas Advent box, because there are at the present only 6 Advent boxes left. I shall be packing them with help over the next couple of days, which is why I need to get absolutely well, so that they're out in the post to you in plenty of time for December the 1st. So thank you very much for watching. You'll be able to see my face tomorrow night. My face doesn't look too bad. Well, no worse than usual, put it like that. But perhaps you'll see me in a much better frame of mind, a better voice, and just feeling 100% instead of 95. But thanks for joining me, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.